and I hope for this interview is to really give people a breakdown of some of the latest happenings that we've got going on. So if you give us a summary of what's been unfolding with China, where we've been lately, and where we stand right now.
Okay, the first thing to note about this is that this is fluid. It's a moving target. It changes all the time. Whatever I say at this point will probably be wrong in 3 days. So it's a very tough thing to keep up on. We started a trade war in 2018 with a lot of countries, but predominantly with China. And throughout 2018, the Trump administration continued to escalate the trade war and put on more tariffs. China retaliated by putting on 15% tariffs on most of the, quite a lot of U.S. agricultural imports. And that, of course, then had an impact. That lowered our exports to China for 2018 quite substantially. Then in 2019, we began to talk with China about, trying to resolve the trade dispute. That happens to be the wrong way to go about this. I think we should have gone through the WTO for all of these trade contests, but that's what's going on. A few weeks ago, the Trump administration threatened to put on more tariffs beginning in September. And China, whenever you get in a trade war, the other side's going to retaliate some way. So China did a couple of things. The first thing it did was it said that they were not going to buy any more agricultural goods. Part of the discussions with China in 2019 have been about getting them to agree to buy more agricultural goods to try to offset the negative impact on agriculture of their tariffs. And so they declared they would not. And I've been checking every day, and I haven't seen anything where China has said they're not, that they're going to go back and start buying again. What happened subsequently was that Trump realized that this might hit a lot of toys at Christmas and stuff like that. And so he put off the tariff increase that was scheduled for September 1st to December. But I haven't seen the Chinese say that they're going to back off. The second thing the Chinese did was they allowed their currency to float. Now, we declared that they were a currency manipulator. Well, they had been maintaining their currency at a sort of psychological point of 7 yuan to the dollar, and they didn't want the currency to weaken against the dollar any beyond that point, right? So they were maintaining it. So what they did was they just stopped maintaining it at that level, and it depreciated against the dollar, which in a sense would offset some of the tariffs that Trump had been talking about putting on. And of course, we've declared them a currency manipulator, which is not an international standard. It's a U.S. thing, and it's only been used, once some 20 years ago or something. But
who was that against?
I don't even remember. I mean, it's just it's not something that comes up, and I'm not sure if there's any particular actions. There are criteria for declaring someone a currency manipulator, and China has not met any of those criteria. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. I don't know what it means, actually, to be honest. So that's kind of the situation. We don't know whether China will go back into the market and start buying more agricultural goods because the tariffs have been put off, or whether they'll say, no, we're going to stick with our guns here. But whatever the case, in the first half of 2019, U.S. agricultural exports to China were down about 21% compared to the first half of 2018. The first half of 2018 was down very substantially compared to 2017 and 2016 and so on. So if they don't buy anything else the rest of this year, we will have, as opposed to somewhere around 20 billion in agricultural exports that we used to do, we may only have 5 or 6 billion.
And a lot of this, we always hear about soybean producers are the ones who are really taking it on the chin with this trade war. So could you give us a sense of how this is specifically impacting Nebraska agriculture and the Nebraska producer, not only in terms of soybeans, but other markets as well?
Yeah, one of the things that makes all of this stuff very, very complicated is that there's a trade war with tariffs and so on and so forth that has an impact. But there are other things going on, as we all know. We had a pretty tough start to the year, and I'm not really up to speed on where things are after the floods that we had in spring, whether people got their, I mean, and there are compensation for delayed plantings and things of that nature. So it's hard to know, and I really can't tell you, so we can ask somebody else maybe who knows a little bit more about this, what's going to happen to soybean prices this year just because of the weather events. Now, if China does not buy any more soybeans from the U.S., well, that adds on. I mean, it goes in the other direction. It would be price depressing, whereas if you have a shortage in supply, that would increase the prices. So how those two things will weigh out will be significant. But of course, even if your prices have gone up because of a shortfall due to the weather, if you don't have any soybeans to sell, then that doesn't make any difference for you, right? So,
Right.
I think that there's a lot of uncertainty, and the China problem just adds to that uncertainty.
Okay, so I don't know that Donald Trump watches this show. If he doesn't, he should. But I don't know if he does. But in the off chance he is watching, if you had Donald Trump's ear, what would you tell him?
Well, I think I'm a trade economist. I believe in free markets and free trade and so on and so forth. I would tell him that the idea that you can win a trade war is wrong. It's incorrect. Everybody loses from a trade war, as we are seeing at this stage. It's very interesting to note that since the trade war started, our overall trade deficit has gotten bigger. Our trade deficit with China has gotten bigger, so it's doing exactly the opposite of what he says he thinks it would be doing. So I would say, stop the trade war would be the first thing that you should do. The second thing would be to go back and contact the countries that the other partners that we had in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. All of the others have gone ahead and made an agreement, and they are going forward with a trade agreement among those absent the United States. We ought to go to them hat in hand and ask them to let us back in on that, because that would have done a whole lot for our beef exports, for example, because it would have opened up the Japanese market quite substantially. So I would say that the idea that the tariffs are a sensible trade policy is incorrect. Now, if I were to say all of that, he'd just tell me it was fake news and so on. But
Sure.
Nevertheless, that's what I would say.
And let's talk a little bit about African swine fever. How is this complicating matters when it comes to trade?
Well, again, I'm not sure of the details, but there's been a big outbreak of African swine fever in China. And China has moved in the particular kind of direction it's gone over the past 8-10 years, is to increase consumption of meat, pork particularly. So they have become very, very large pork producers and pork consumers, and they import pork and so on. But with the swine fever outbreak, that they had to slaughter off a lot of animals, and that then means that they have fewer animals that they need to feed. So that's going to reduce the demand for soybeans. It's another one of those complicating factors that makes for greater uncertainty.
So if we take China out of the equation, what are some export opportunities for Nebraska producers currently or down the road?
Well, there are, I think, a lot of others. Again, one of the things that would have been useful to do would be to be in something like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, where we could have perhaps, that included Vietnam. Vietnam is likely going to be an interesting market. The TPP did not include Indonesia, I believe. Indonesia is the fourth largest country in the world. They consume huge amounts of soybeans as tofu. Right? They don't feed livestock all that much, and they certainly don't eat pork because they're a Muslim country. So, human consumption of soybeans. For lunch today, I had one of the Impossible Whopper sandwiches made out of vegetable stuff.
How was it?
It was okay. It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. It wasn't quite as juicy as I think a usual Whopper is. But then again, so maybe, edible markets, edible soybean markets would be something that could be, that's probably a little bit longer term. Short term, I think, Brazil will be selling more soybeans to China. We'll be selling less.
Yeah.
But that means that Brazil will be selling fewer soybeans to other countries where it used to trade, so that opens up some possible markets there for the United States as well. And I'm not sure exactly what those are, but I think Asia is sort of the biggest actor. You know, Japan, South Korea, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand. These are growing economies, and they've got lots and lots of people. So. I think those are probably and the other thing is we always need to keep in mind that our best trading partners are our NAFTA partners, Canada and Mexico. So what we can
and
do
once
with
that gets
them-
approved, maybe that'll open up some things.
Yeah, maybe so.
And also been reading a lot about a possible recession on the horizon. Do you see any warning signs of that happening, and how would that impact ag?
Well, it would probably not be very good for agriculture because a recession means that people are spending less, they're buying less expensive things, and so on. It can also have financial implications for the banking system and so on. So recessions are not very good. Our recessions tend to be pretty short. The last one was very deep. And it's taken us a long time. But the recovery that we've had now that started around 2010 has been going on. This is a record-breaking lengthy recovery, and there's a sort of a sense that there comes a point at which, you know, after you've had, it's been fairly anemic growth over the last 10 years. But at least we've been growing, we haven't been in a recession. But there's a sense that, you know, this can only go on for so long and then you're going to have a crack. What people have pointed to is the upside down interest rates on bonds, that the long-term bonds are having a lower interest rate than short-term, and that suggests that people are not confident about the future. So they point to that as a possible harbinger of recession. I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't predict whether there will be. There's probably a fairly good chance. Even if there's not a recession, we're not going to be doing 4 or 5% economic growth. We're only going to be doing, you know, 1 or 2%, I think, for the foreseeable future. And so that means that, you know, we aren't going to be seeing huge expansion of things. But I'm not sure. Again, I think this is part of what makes everybody's life difficult. There's so much uncertainty because that's another factor that piles
So
onto
many
this.
moving parts.
Yeah, and a lot of people point to the trade war itself as something that is giving people worries about. I mean, when China decided not to buy the agricultural goods and let their currency depreciate, the stock market crashed and so on, and now it's come back and then it crashed again. So, well, people are just getting a little skittish, it looks to me, and so it's anybody's guess. I have no crystal ball, I can't tell you for sure, but I think there is probably a moderate chance that we will have a recession, and whether or not that's really bad for agriculture depends on how severe it is. And the chances are, my sense is that recessions tend to not be too, you know, the last one only lasted 2 quarters, even though it was very deep.
Yeah.
And I don't think that recessions, I mean, I think we've got tools to deal with recessions that can make them not quite as, they aren't going to last. We're not going to get a Great Depression unless we do something really stupid. And so I think that probably it's probably the least, it's far enough away and may not be so bad. And so maybe that's not the greatest concern, I think, for people in agriculture to worry about at this stage. I think the trade war is the bigger problem.